The following is a Fourth Hand production.
Hey, everybody. Welcome in again to Sad Times. My name is Kevin. For those of you who have not listened to the show, how about a little explanation? Awesome. So, have you been sad before? I know I have. I was sad 10 minutes ago. I'll be sad 10 minutes from now, probably. But I think we all go through some times in our life where we are sad, upset, anxious, angry, whatever you want to call it, those emotions, I guess, that make us human. And too often I find that we don't really talk about those things, myself included. We all say, hey, everything's fine, everything's cool, I've got it all under control. And while we do to a degree, I think that if we as people talked a little bit more about what our struggles were, whether it be sad, anxious, etc., I think we would all feel a little less alone, and I think we'd probably be more empathetic. So that's what Sad Times is. I bring on a guest every week, and we have a conversation just about those times in their life. So thanks for listening. This week's guest, I have to call him J.T., which I don't like.
You can call me whatever you want.
All right, John Thomas.
Just at least mention that it could be either person.
He is J.T. Brown. He is one of my nearest and dearest and closest friends. John, thanks for coming on, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me. And I apologize for the name fiasco. It's been going on my whole life, trying to discern when you have two first names. Should you go by John? Should you go by John Thomas? Should you go by JT? So different circles label me different ways. We'll just say
most
that.
people, would you say now, though, most people call you JT?
Yeah, because 6th grade on, basically.
Was it really?
Outside of Monticello, 6th grade on.
Oh, yeah. I didn't know it was that early.
Yeah,
okay. And your mom still calls you John Thomas, right?
Are you kidding? Of course.
Okay, good. Well, she's committed.
I couldn't, under torture, she would not name, say any other name. So
that's fair. What, but like when you work, you're called JT and everything? Okay, great. So you and I, obviously, we just kind of talked about, you said 6th grade. I think we met in 5th grade, right?
Mm-hmm.
Grew up together, and especially middle school, but really high school, along with Eric, we were really, 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 really close friends. We spent a lot of time playing cards, playing wrestling video games and things like that.
The counter era.
Yeah,
don't forget that
the counter era.
The count where we would counter a counter from the counter with the counter.
Oh yes,
on that game?
Yeah, yes. And then I would watch you guys play first-person shooters and hate my life. So, but we were really close. We were people in high school who we didn't drink or do any of that stuff. We seriously just laughed a lot. I always think fondly of those times. And I know that you, Eric, and myself are still really close. So I count myself lucky in that. But one thing that really brought us together, I think, we started talking about it, I don't know exactly when, but we were both anxious kids, right?
Very much so.
So can you tell us a little bit about kind of your anxiety and, when you feel that maybe that started, how it manifested, things like that? Just give us a general idea of it.
Sure, absolutely. And we'll get to this later, but, I'm a licensed clinical social worker, so now through the lens of hindsight, of course, I could see I could drill down into the layers of what was going on. But at the time, especially as a kid, you don't know what's going on. I think I had my first panic attack or series of panic attacks around 1st grade. And it was
early?
Yeah, it was centered around my Nintendo. Because I had read in Nintendo Power that if you leave it on for X amount of hours, it'll burn out. The motor is not the correct word, but whatever it is. And so I in your kid mind, it's like, I got this for Christmas, so this is like my prized possession. So it was when I lived on Washington Street, the big house with the pink shutters. And my bedroom was upstairs, and I would just lay in my bed and not be able to sleep for fear that I hadn't turned my Nintendo off. So I would go down 15 steps, go across the kitchen through the dining room to the room where the Nintendo was, check it, make sure it was okay.
Right.
Go back across, back up. And then 10 minutes later,
you would go down again.
I really don't think I got it. I don't think I got it. I need to go down. So I would do that sometimes. And sometimes not for months at a time, and then other times, several times per week.
Would you find, you mentioned the number of steps. Were you counting the steps?
No, nothing like that. It was
it.
purely a means to an end in terms of of getting to the Nintendo to make sure it was turned off.
Would you find, in retrospect, again, you said you wouldn't go do that for months. Would it start to happen when you were stressed out about certain things in your life? If you could be stressed out at 6?
Yeah, I don't know. I never really thought, again, it's hard to know. I never really thought about it in those terms. I mean, the first time I had the quote unquote panic attack was, I was at a birthday party at like the Decatur, what was it? The Decatur Holodome, right?
Oh, yeah. Oh.
So I couldn't check to make sure it would turn off. And I had was convinced I had left it on. And I puked in the hotel bathroom because I was so upset and nervous, and I kept waking up the person's dad being like, I really gotta get home.
Were you telling him you had to get home? Now, did you feel ashamed?
Oh, because totally. Yeah, I didn't say why.
Yeah, you just said, "Oh, I gotta go."
I gotta go. And
was there a lot of self-loathing in there too? Like, why am I so anxious about this? I should just get over it.
Yeah, I mean, at that point, I don't know that I had the eagle eye view necessary to really see it through that lens. Sure. I just wanted relief from that worry.
And when you got home, is that the first thing you did? You went and checked it? And was it off?
It was off every time.
So you're talking about with the power button on, right? Yeah. With the red light on?
Correct.
Yeah, okay.
Correct.
Yeah, I bet you never left it on.
Yeah. No.
So was the big fear you said earlier was it was a Christmas gift, so I'm trying to kind of backtrack it.
Sure.
You're going to let down the people who gave it to you by ruining it, or what was the root of it?
I think that was a part of it. I think it was also my prized possession, and so I didn't want to. I think I was coming from a scarcity model, even though I had no scarcity in my life. Kind of on a side note, I was a little bit hesitant to come on the show just because I feel like I've led a pretty charmed life, and I don't feel like I have a significant amount of external suffering to really pull from. All of mine is kind of self-inflicted, but there's something to that too.
There's a lot to that, and I appreciate what you're saying, but mine is also very self-inflicted, internal, and that, at least in my experience, changes my behavior towards people in different ways. And I think I've spent a lot of my time, and I don't know if this is true of you, trying to explain myself to people I care about.
Sure.
And the fact that you're brave enough to come on here and share some of this stuff, basically what I'm saying is I think it's brave that you come on, and I think it's valid stuff that you're talking about.
Yeah. And every time, so I have this, the presentation that I do throughout the hospital and throughout the university about anxiety and panic attacks. And I've never had one of those, I don't think, where I don't have someone come up and say, "Oh my God, I thought I was just crazy." That you have this too.
You've never had anybody come up and say that?
No, I've had it every time.
Oh,
I don't
exactly.
think I've ever not had anyone.
That's exactly what the show,
Yeah.
We want to be, because I didn't have panic attacks about the Nintendo, but in my one-man show, I talked about this. I had panic attacks about a shovel that I'd left outside. And I was just really worried about the shovel. It's the
concept,
same thing, right? It's just I want to control that. I want to get to it. It's just a terrible, foreboding feeling.
Yeah. I guess on that from the Nintendo perspective, it was again, kind of a scarcity. If I ruin this, I'm shot. I won't be able to get another one. And I don't know why I thought that. I mean, it was not... My parents would not have, but I didn't want to ask them for it because they'd made a big deal that they got it for me, which was awesome, and it was this huge present.
I have to ask what your favorite, what was your favorite game?
Oh man,
I know you're a big
regular
gamer.
Nintendo.
Yeah,
regular. I don't know. Super Nintendo has many more of my favorites.
Yeah,
but regular Nintendo. Probably Super Mario 3 was the one I logged the most time on.
Did you beat it?
Oh, yeah. Of course.
Did you ever feel guilty about playing video games as a kid?
Yeah, I mean, sort of. I think I was I passive aggressively, chided myself for not being outdoors or
right.
whatever.
Yeah,
you know
I did
mean?
the same thing. Plus, I think it's fair to say, are skilled at video games in a way that I am not. But you also, I think it's fair to say, you have a master's degree, right? And what's your master's degree in?
Social work.
Social work. But growing up, you weren't the most studious of people at school. You know what I mean? But
total
loafer. But when you went to school, college, that is, that definitely changed. So I know you would draw comics and all that stuff. So that leads me to another question. Would you find some sort of salve in being creative if you were anxious, would you feel you wanted to be creative? Was it a reaction to that?
That's a good question. I haven't thought about if there's an interaction there. I think probably escapism in general probably is maybe where my imagination comes from, just because as a kid, even as an adult on some level, the real world is scary. Mm-hmm. Scary shit happens.
Yeah. Oh, you could curse.
Okay.
Fuck yeah.
So I think in my imagination, again, I can control that. And so like the only bad thing that's going to happen is what I have scripted. Mm-hmm. And so I think drawing and writing and escaping, from an imagination standpoint is always where I've gone. That's why I never paid attention. I mean, college, I got very serious about it, but up to that point, I mean, I wrote a 1-act play in algebra because I just was not.
You just weren't
paying
having
attention
it.
at all.
Do you remember, were you in my class with Mr. Miller when I would count how many times he said class?
Yes, we were actually, and we had a celebration when we broke the record, and he looked back at us, and we were shamed.
Just for people listening, there's a teacher who would kind of lecture and would say a sentence, and then nobody would answer, and he'd say class. Yeah. And he said class like 151 times one day or something.
His equivalent to the Ferris Bueller teachers, anyone.
Yeah, anyone.
Yep.
Bueller, So, so when you had that panic attack, like when you were laying in bed, how did that manifest in your body? Yeah, so
throughout the course of the wild ride with anxiety, it always has the same physical symptoms. So,
yeah, tell me about those.
For me, it's always rapid heartbeat, sweating, diarrhea, restlessness, just not being able to like chill out basically. Yeah. Almost always stomach. I always lose. The only benefit of when I go through a period of which I have panic attacks is significant weight loss.
Because you can't, are you not able to eat?
Can't eat. Shit 10 times a day. I mean, just like
Do you really? I did not know that.
Maybe not 10, but
multiple times. And it's diarrhea. Huh?
And then after that, it's white foam. It's like there's nothing left in there.
I have the same thing with my stomach, right? I'll throw up a lot when I'm really anxious or stressed out. That's where it manifests.
Yeah, definitely.
And I don't want to eat.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Not
at all. So would you have that problem when you were after? Okay, actually, let me go ahead. After the Nintendo thing, how long did it take you to kind of get over that fear?
It was just kind of off and on, and I didn't have a frame of reference, so I didn't think it was like weird. You know what I mean? I just thought that's what people did.
Exactly.
It was not that bad. That was like the main one when I was a little kid, and I kind of went dormant until 6th grade. And when I started going through puberty, then it went off the charts, where it was like interrupting my life. On some level.
How do you mean?
So, that's when I it was late 6th grade. I want to say sometime in the spring. But I was that was when it came back. I think because my body was changing, I was very frightened by the changes and didn't know, what does this mean? Do I have cancer? Am I dying? Is my dick falling off? Whatever it might be. The just crazy, silly, ridiculous worries of a person.
Like a lot of hypochondria?
Yeah, kind of. Yeah. I mean, but seemingly related to puberty. Really funny story about trying to talk to my dad about it. I tried to talk. My dad is a great guy, but he doesn't worry much. And so I was in the truck with him. We were out by Allerton Park. I said, Dad, do you ever like worry about like your balls or your penis? No. That was it.
That was it.
No.
He didn't ask a follow-up question?
He didn't ask a follow-up question. What? No.
No, that sounds about right.
And then I was like, okay.
And that's so hard because then you feel even more isolated or alone. It's not like he meant to do that.
Jumping on him. He's a wonderful guy. But he would not be a guy who would know how to deal with a kid that's worrying about, his junk as it's changing.
Did he ever see you have a panic attack that you can remember?
Not that he was kind of oblivious to it. I had one in a movie one time. It was actually, Major League 2.
Oh, back to
Okay. And so I just kept leaving and going and having the shits. Yeah. And he was just like, "Are you okay?" And then like we had Long John Silver's or something. It's like, "Are the hush puppies not agreeing with you?" Type of thing. And so I just made him sound like your dad. He doesn't actually sound like your dad.
No, your dad is I'd say more pleasant sounding. Not to say that my dad's
loud.
not pleasant.
Very loud
You're
sounding.
loud and eats fast.
Yeah, he eats very fast with his arm curled around the bowl. Anyway, so I think he was just like, are you sick? Type of like, he didn't realize that I got up 3 or 4 times in that movie and had the squirts. So,
have you watched the movie since?
No, it's got like a weird, it's now like trapped in my hippocampus that I can't like watch it. So
yeah, I remember my dad saw me have some panic attacks and talked to me on the phone, and I feel for him in retrospect big time, because he didn't know what to do with that.
Exactly.
Because it was,
that generation, I mean, they were not exposed to mental health, particularly mental health of like boys and men, was just not something that their dads talked to them about. You know what I mean?
I'm sorry, I'm just thinking again about your conversation about the balls.
Yeah, I think I literally like stumbled through it like about your balls. Very, very awkward. My voice was cracking. I was in 6th grade.
Yeah. My dad, I remember one time on the phone, I just kept saying, I have this feeling, it won't go away. I don't know what to do.
Sure.
And I remember he was exasperated because he couldn't help me. Mm-hmm. And he told me, he's a religious man. I was a religious person at the time. He told me to pray about it. And so I did. I really, prayed hard about it. And
if you notice, the more that you do that to try to will it away via a deity or just yourself, the more it is embedded deeper in your brain.
What do you mean by that?
So if you want to talk about it, we definitely can, but fast forwarding a little bit, studying the neurochemistry of a panic attack was extremely freeing for me.
Okay.
And it really, it felt like when Dorothy and the crew came in and Oz was there and he was big and he was booming and he was scary. And then they pulled back the curtain and pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. And then it's like, wait, this isn't scary at all. And I felt that way when I studied the neurochemistry of what was going on in a panic attack, which I can, if you
tell
want
me a little bit. Let's just say, describing you being at the Holodome and the meaning, what do you, in your understanding, what was going on in your brain that caused those feelings of anxiousness?
Sure. So it's a feedback loop, and it's the chicken or the egg type of thing. So there's a part of your brain called the amygdala, and it's this little part of your brain that is kind of like the car alarm. So it's an important piece of your brain because it ignites your fight, flight, or freeze response. So you're probably familiar with that, which is essentially what anxiety is. We're talking lizard brain a little bit. You're a caveman. You are walking by a lion. A lion roars at you. Your amygdala goes off. It gives you a rush of chemicals, and it gives you a rush of endorphins that make you stronger so that you can fight or you can run away. Or in certain things, when your instincts know to do it, you freeze to try to stay really still if you can't beat it in a fight or run away from it. And so that's a very natural, normal evolutionary process that's happening in your brain, the fight or flight response. But the amygdala is the trigger that sets it
where
off.
is the amygdala?
I want to say it's near the limbic system. I don't remember exactly where it is.
Let me just say, too,
small almond-shaped little piece.
Yeah, and we're definitely not doctors, right? This is just
Absolutely not.
Your own research. But, so the amygdala is triggered.
Yes.
Okay.
What happens after that is, so you get that rush, right? You get that rush of the chemicals. If you're actually running from a lion, you're not feeling like, wow, I noticed that I feel very uncomfortable while my heart is beating and I'm sweating.
Yeah.
So it is useful, when our ancestors millions of years ago were trying to survive in the wild. It's less useful now. What happens is your brain is very, very smart, right? So the amygdala triggers, and then it's not like you have to just reinvent the wheel every time. After that story, that emotional tale, is committed to your hippocampus, and it's encoded with emotion. So that's the emotional part of your brain that retains that. So next time, if you hear a roar from 100 feet away, you're going to get set off.
Okay.
Because your brain is keeping you alive. I know that's dangerous. So in my hippocampus, this tale, lions are dangerous, has been encoded strongly with emotion. So that's what that part of your brain does. So it's kind of a feedback loop, though, if it's connected to something that's not actually dangerous. So at some point, when I read about my Nintendo being left on, it set off my amygdala. Oh, my God. I got to make sure it's turned off. I don't want to lose it. I don't want it to break, blah, blah, blah. And then because my amygdala triggered, that story was encased in emotion in my hippocampus after that point. So got to make sure my Nintendo's okay. Got to be thinking about it. Got to be vigilant. Got to stay on it, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. And then when I'm thinking about that, it re-triggers it. Because that's the fascinating thing about your amygdala hippocampus relationship is that you actually don't have to have had something happen. If you can imagine it well enough. And that's why I have no research to back this. This is just my personal experience of 15 years as a social worker. I think creative people are more at risk for anxiety. No research to back it up. The reason I think that is because a vivid imagination allows you to envision a future better than if you didn't have a vivid imagination. So
are you saying, to use an example of mine, when I saw a movie where a guy got killed in the electric chair, and then I became very afraid that I was going to die in the electric chair. Absolutely. What I had done is I had created a story there and tied the emotion to it. And was it created in my amygdala said electric chair bad? When
you saw that, your amygdala fired. Okay. And you said, holy cow, this would be horrible. His eyes pop out. He shits himself, whatever. Yeah. And then after that, so your amygdala fired around electric chairs. And then your hippocampus took notice of it and said, electric chairs. This is dangerous. Yeah. This is worrisome. Yeah. I got to be vigilant. I got to keep on top of this. I got to make sure that I do not die in the electric chair.
Yeah.
And then it becomes something that you're focused on, you're thinking about. It's been tagged as important in your hippocampus. So when you return to that, your amygdala fires again, thus completing the feedback loop.
Well, and I don't know if this has anything to do with it, but I was diagnosed with obsessive compulsive disorder, I don't know, 8 years ago maybe.
Sure.
And for a while, my anxiety is such that it tells me that I'm wrong about my anxiety all the time. But I obsess over things.
Absolutely.
And is that part of that whole thing too, or is that something separate?
No, it is 100% that.
Okay. So, because I obsess.
And then your rituals are a means to try to decrease the feeling that you have created. It's a coping mechanism. They're not particularly good coping mechanisms, but they are coping mechanisms. Yep. And that is your feedback
way to not
loop.
Think about it, I guess, is the way that a very simple way to say it.
I would say a way to defer thinking about it and a way to lessen the symptoms. Now, if you want to weigh in on the OCD part from a personal perspective, please feel free to do so.
Yeah.
Because I don't have the ritual. I don't have the compulsions.
Okay.
I have the obsessions, but not the compulsions. So if that's something, my understanding is that it decreases the symptoms. It decreases the need to focus on it, and it puts a bow on it. So it's like, I did my thing. So now I can stop thinking about this.
Yeah, that's that. And it's like, it gives me, or anybody, I think a good way to say it is it gives me a sense of control.
Absolutely.
I've done this. Now that I've done that, that's not going to happen.
Yes, exactly.
And I do shit. I mean, it gets really, sorry to go off on a tangent.
No.
It gets really tied up in my everyday thing. As you know, I've been doing push-ups and crunches 6 days a week.
10 years?
May of 12 and a half. Wow. Well, not half. And now it's like, I talked to my therapist about it. It's like, if I'm not going to stop doing that. Like, I had a shoulder injury last weekend. Or not last weekend, Jesus. Last year. And I was like, I did finally allow myself to go down on the number of push-ups, but I would not stop, because if I stop, that's bad.
Yeah.
I have to keep doing it.
Sure.
I must. So, going back to you and your experience with these panic attacks. And so, the amygdala, the hippocampus. So you said it makes your heart beat. Yeah, you sweat. You have some intestinal, we'll say, issues.
Intestinal distress.
Yeah. And that's still the same today if you have...
exactly the same.
Exactly the same.
It is my oldest friend.
Okay. And can you, as far as anxiety goes, do you know the last time you had a panic attack?
So it would have been, and sometimes, I don't know about you, but sometimes intense anxiety, it's hard to discern if you went into the realm of panic attack or if you just rode a really bad bout out. Do you know what I'm saying?
Of course, yeah.
So, I'll say the most recent time where I had a bad bout for a couple of weeks was about 3 months ago. Triggered by, I'm an idiot and I shouldn't read things on the internet, triggered by reading articles about being publicly shamed on the internet, and just being terrified of the thought of what that would be like to be upheld for such ridicule and mistreatment. Then just worrying about, oh my God, what have I thought? What have I said? Did I do something to offend somebody in 1993? Like, and just going down that road. And again, having such an imaginative mind that I'm able to
create this whole world,
feel it as if it's happened. Yep. And again, the amygdala goes off. Oh, public shaming is important. I got to think about that. I got to hold on to that. I got to, so, but I use the strategies that I have, which we can talk about. And I rode it out. I rode the wave, and I came into surf, and I was a little salty, but I was okay.
Tell me a little bit about the strategies that you use.
So what I found, again, this is not, I am saying this as a social worker, but I'm not endorsing any one specific form.
This is
therapy.
Just what works for you.
Just what works for me.
Yeah.
So I had a lot of things that were really ineffective for a lot of years that just did not help and in fact made things worse. And the only time I really got relief other than just the relief of it passing because I wore out, the only time I actually got real relief was when I started doing what's called ACT, which is acceptance and commitment therapy. And the reason it's different is it's just a different paradigm. So and I'm not ragging on CBT. I'm not doing that.
What's
so that's
CBT?
Cognitive behavioral therapy.
Okay, got it.
So the approach to cognitive behavioral therapy is, and this is very nutshell, right? So is that people that are suffering from this have a faulty paradigm, and the goal of a therapist or of an individual in their own work is to try to poke holes in that faulty paradigm until that paradigm falls in. So that's why you sort of gently challenge, clients.
Is this exposure therapy?
So exposure is in both, but no. So this is more, no one likes me. I'm a failure at work. And it's like, well, that's obviously not actually realistically accurate. It's not that no one likes you. And so you're trying to find little ways to poke holes in that paradigm that no one likes me until you find a more realistic point of view.
Oh shit,
and
that's
so,
what my therapist does.
Yeah, CBT. How about that? And so that can be very effective for some people. What I found just in my own personal experience is that as quickly as I would poke holes in my anxious paradigm, there would be a new bit of anxiety to plug that hole. And I just was chasing, just chase, just cut, patch, cut, patch, cut, patch, cut, patch. And I could never bring it down.
And did you think every time that you made that cut, you're like, now we'll have some relief?
Yes.
And then it just doubles down.
Exactly.
Yep.
Exactly. And the desire for relief was the problem, which I'll get to.
Yeah. Very well said.
So yeah, I didn't find it helpful for me. Other people do, and that's absolutely great. And I think the human brain is so complex, it can't be boiled down to one approach working for anyone. But the reason ACT worked for me was so effective is it was the first time someone gave me permission. Stop fighting. Just let it be there. Because the focus of ACT is about carrying your anxiety with you and doing things that are important in your life, as opposed to trying to get rid of it, escape it, beat it, etc. It is, the goal of ACT is not in any way, shape, or form to reduce anxiety. But here's a secret. It reduces anxiety. Yeah. So,
I'm glad you whispered that. I don't want anybody else
exactly.
to know that.
Don't let anyone know.
Yeah.
So it's all of these different approaches. There's 6 dimensions to it. They call it the hexaflex, which is a silly name, but it's a hexagon of things that allow your brain to be more flexible. And so I found that was much more helpful, because the big metaphor, if there's an ACT, is huge on metaphors because of the way that it interacts in your brain. That's different than speaking, which is complex and in the woods. We won't go into it, but the big ACT metaphor is that you are standing across a pit from a big, ugly monster. And you are holding onto a rope, and that monster's holding onto a rope. And he's like 8 feet. He's like Giant Gonzalez, but ripped with the suit, with the body suit. So, yeah. And so he's pulling, he's yelling at you, he's screaming, he's cussing, he's making fun of you, and he's pulling, and you're saying, that's not true. I'm pulling back. I'm fighting you. I want to pull you into the pit. You can control me. I've got this. This is mine. And I feel like for me, every other thing I did was trying to pull against the monster. And ACT was the first time I had ever been told, drop the fucking rope. Just drop the rope. Just don't.
And all the power is gone.
All the power is gone. And he's still yelling. He's still yelling, and he's insulting your mom, and he's telling you you're fat and whatever. But he can't pull you toward the pit anymore at that point. You can hear it. You can listen. It's still there. Don't get me wrong. It's still there.
Oh, it's still there. and so you're being really eloquent about like just sitting, what I call sitting with it.
Exactly. That's basically one of the practices.
So I guess my therapist does all of it because she does that too. I've gotten better at it, but man, anxiety is so frustrating because it feels pretty much the same every time. It
does.
But the thing is, it feels like reality. And when you have that feeling, you just want it gone.
Yep. Exactly.
And it leads to behaviors. I get agitated, things like that. And but if you're saying drop the rope,
the desire to have it gone is rope pulling. Quit doing it.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
You see what I'm saying?
Another thing my therapist says is, you know, what you should do is schedule a time to worry about that.
Yeah, that is helpful. That's one of the tricks,
she goes,
too.
You know, say 7 p.m. tonight, I'll worry about it. And when I do that, I go, okay. And then I just forget it.
Yes.
And then, of course, at 7, I'm worried about something else.
Or at 7, if you do sit down to worry about it, you feel like a fool.
Yeah, you're like, oh, really? I'm sitting down to worry about this?
Yeah.
It's almost like I'm watching 2.5 Men.
So it was super effective to me. What you're describing is one of the aspects of ACT, is what they call cognitive fusion. So a good example is when they give like a drawing of like a Cthulhu-looking monster on your face, which is cool. And so when you are fused with your thoughts, it's there. It is blinding you. You can't talk. You can't see. You can't do anything. And so you're pulling at it and you're trying to yank it, and the tentacles are just wrapping more around your arm.
It's like a Chinese finger trap.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And it's just continuing to become. So the goal, because the fact is, the more you try to wrestle with it, the more entangled you're going to become with it. So the goal is try to get space, to be what they call diffused from your thoughts. And so what they mean by that is just trying to get space between your thoughts and your self-concept. So they do stupid little things that are somewhat effective, which is just like stepping to the side and saying, I notice that I'm feeling this way. I notice that I'm worrying about that. Even that tiny little crack can get you a little bit of space from those thoughts. Because again, trying to remove it gets you entangled. Trying to carry it is much more effective at getting space.
That's really well said. And I think that's a good spot to end on the anxiety thing, because I mean, some of these things I kind of knew just from years of therapy and talking to people, but I just think that was so well said. That monster metaphor and the rope really was great, and I think it's helpful. So let's take a little break, and then we'll come back and we'll discuss some more stuff on the other side of the break. Sounds good, John?
Sounds great.
All right, thanks, man.
Yeah.
Which Beatles album cover has over 70 people on it?
What is the only state capital that has 3 consecutive vowels in its name?
Who is the only president with his name on a plaque on the moon?
Find out the answers to these questions and more on Quiz Quiz Bang Bang, the pub quiz practice show that hits you pow, right in the quizzer.
New shows every week, including straight-up questions and answers, teams going head-to-head, and themed bonus episodes.
Listen to Quiz Quiz Bang Bang for trivia practice, a fun challenge, or to learn something new.
Come for the trivia. Stay for the trivia.
Visit quizbangpod.com or search Quiz Quiz Bang Bang wherever you get your podcasts.
Quiz Quiz Bang Bang.
Here's looking at you, Quiz.
Hey everybody, welcome back in to Sad Times. As a reminder, my guest today, the great John Thomas Brown, or JT, as he's known by almost everybody. I refuse. Although, what does Eric call you?
He calls me an inappropriate nickname.
Do you not want to talk about that?
No, it's fine.
No, he calls you Jizz.
Yeah. Which was the is language of Jizan Tizamas. So
he told me, he goes, tell Jizz, give him a big wet kiss for me. So that's coming later.
Duly noted.
I know it sounds like I just had Eric speak into the microphone, but that was actually my impression of Eric. Okay. So we left off. You really had an eloquent and thoughtful explanation of anxiety and kind of how you deal with it, some stuff that you've learned. At the end of the show, I might ask you about some places maybe that people could read
Absolutely.
about that, because I think it would be amazing to give that to people if they want to learn
Sure.
more.
Happy to do it.
Now, I mentioned earlier that my dad, when I was having some trouble, told me to pray, and I prayed. And you've, at least to my knowledge, have always been somebody who faith is very important, correct?
Yeah. So, ironically, I think this is a great segue.
Thank you.
I think that faith fit. No, let me. I could because there's a lot of different dimensions of this. So I'm going to start with this. We'll say fundamentalism. The teeth of fundamentalism fit perfectly in the gears of anxiety for me. So I was a weird kid and would ask my parents about death. What happens after we die? Where's so-and-so? What about cats? Et cetera, et cetera.
Uh-huh.
And my parents, who are not religious, I mean, they're Creasters, Christmas and Easters, right? So they were like, we're going to, you can go to church. They'll answer those questions.
Is that really
So they
how
would
you kinda got
literally
started?
drive me to the church that my dad went to as a kid, my stepdad went to as a kid. And they would drop me off and then they would leave. And then I was just this random 9-year-old in service, with my Bible, ready to learn.
So what was your denomination?
So that was non-denominational.
Non-denominational,
Yeah. So,
okay.
but it would have been, and we can talk about it. It's fascinating to me. Church history in general is fascinating. But so this would have been heavy on the evangelical side of Protestantism, not to the complete, far literalist side, but close, but on the strong literalist side, we'll say.
Okay.
So
I didn't know this about you, that you just kind of got dropped off at church.
dropped off at church, they would leave.
We'll
They
be
would come
back
back.
after
How
Sunday
was
school.
it? Did you
Yeah.
get your answers? Oh, kind of.
Okay, good. We'll try again next week.
That's basically
Good news is it's there every Sunday.
Exactly.
So that's how you kind of got into faith, Christian faith.
And it was a weird salve because, man, so again, we'll talk about what Christianity has come to mean to me as an adult, which is very different. But at that time, fundamentalist Christianity is strongly committed to answers and not questions. And that was what I thought I needed because I was so anxious.
Well, that's
when I
you
die.
holding onto the rope.
Exactly. I was holding onto the rope. And by God, fundamentalism, if it does nothing else, it gives you gloves to try to really, really get your hands in on that rope and really try to pull. And it maybe gives you a vest you can tie it to.
Yeah.
And
You're really, all your weight is on the rope.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So that's what it did for me. Ironically, it actually kind of worsened the symptoms in sort of in a big way.
How do you mean?
So then you've got an extra layer of worry. If you don't, so everyone claims they believe in a loving deity, but boy, he don't seem too loving
not at all.
in fundamentalism. So I then had to worry about appeasing an angry God.
Yep.
So this was going on even up into my teen years. And so I would be driving my car worrying that if I didn't pray for forgiveness, what if I crashed and I still had a sin left?
Yes, exactly.
Before that happened.
My soul.
And then my soul was going to be damned to hell forever.
Yep.
It was really freeing when I found out there may not really be a hell in the traditional sense.
Wait a minute. Well, what?
Yeah. How about that? When you learn more about Koine Greek, it's a little bit different. It's a little bit gray.
You mean in the language that the Bible was originally written in?
Correct.
Yeah, because to build off what you're saying, I just get so frustrated, right? Because it's like, oh, you're a loving God, as it's been presented to me as a child.
Mm-hmm.
You're a loving God, but if you don't love me, fuck you.
By crikey.
Yeah,
You're done.
You're done. And at first, I was like, "That's right. Okay, then I'm going to love you." And I did the thing.
That was what I needed
pray,
at the time.
And I'll say my prayers before sleep, and I just pray that exactly if I don't. What if I die now and I haven't
haven't
checked
appeased
all the
it.
boxes?
Yeah.
So
that's an OT mindset, my friend.
operating Thetan.
Old Testament.
Oh,
yes,
Old Testament.
maybe. Yeah. Okay. I'll give you that
Sorry,
too.
I went to Scientology.
I like
route
that.
now.
That's
Very
your mind
nice.
there.
Yeah, it
nice
is, isn't it,
reference.
though?
I like it.
Don't tell my parents.
I've been filled with Thetans my whole life.
Yeah, me too, man. Damn evil galactic
That's
lords.
right.
So you said I remember your red car that you drove around, J.T.R. V1.
Yep.
And so when did that start to change for you? This idea of kind of the fundamentalist look at it to, I think what you were saying is this gave you a lot of answers, and
Correct.
it sounded like you were saying that you've transformed into more questions, or
Yeah. So it gave me answers that don't hold up to scrutiny. So that's the hard part. As a kid, answers don't.
Isn't that
hold
what
up to
faith
scrutiny.
is, right? That's what they tell me.
Yeah, no, I don't think it is.
Okay.
I really don't. So, so it gave me answers that don't hold up to scrutiny, which was useful as a child, became less so as an adult. So I went to college, and I actually went to a conservative school. We'll leave
your mascot?
names.
The Bibles.
The Bibles.
Yeah.
We'll leave names unsaid. But went to a conservative Christian school, and ironically, what happens when you do that is you go one of three paths. You either continue to drink the Kool-Aid ad nauseum, or you become an atheist, or you become what me and my wife sort of did, which is you break apart and everything is shattered in your faith, and then you rebuild it in a healthier and more flexible way. One of those three things will happen. You will not escape unscathed if you go to a
because
school.
it is so overwhelming and suffocating and
rigid and regimented. Yeah. But ironically, so many of professors at those type of schools, though, don't necessarily always carry water, right? They don't always carry the water for the university.
You don't say.
So many of them want to really reach students and help them to have the information to make their own decisions, which is really, really cool.
Which is what that's
what education is supposed to be, right? Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm.
About that. So what happened was, took a bunch of religion courses that were really interesting, challenging, fascinating. Started to see that maybe the evangelical model is just that. It's a model predicated on an effective way to touch people's lives, but maybe isn't actually necessarily as cleanly cut as the way a pre-Constantinian Christian environment would have been. Mm-hmm. So you learn about the history. You learn to contextualize the Bible, which is very dangerous. It's very dangerous to think about putting the Bible in context. You learn about the Koine Greek that it was written in. You learn about the Hebrew that the Old Testament was written in. You learn about the different tribes of Israel and their behaviors and the environment and the identity from which they were coming from. And it shakes everything up. Either that or you just ignore it and it doesn't, and you continue to have.
Did you try to ignore it?
No, because I've always had a curious mind. And so I guess I did for a while, for about a year. And then
would this be around your freshman year of college?
Year. Okay. Yep. And then it slowly starts to not make as much sense. And Rob Bell, who's a religious writer that I really like, talks about brick wall theology versus trampoline theology. And so he talks about with the brick wall theology, if you take out a brick, it's kind of like Jenga. If you take enough out, it's going to fall apart. And it also is kind of generally used to keep people out. Whereas a trampoline theology, he talks about rusty springs. You look at the spring and you take a look at it and you bounce it and it's rusty. It's not working anymore. It's not safe. You take it out and you put a new spring in and you invite people to jump with you. And you can constantly be changing springs if they no longer reflect accurately what you think. Okay. And so what he's talking about is rigid dogma versus flexible dogma, or rigid theology versus flexible theology, I would say. And so my rigidity was kind of broken because, and I can see why people either just ignore and become impervious and have a wall, or why when it breaks, they just give up and they say, well, this was all a lie. Forget it. I'm out.
I'm definitely kind of in the latter group.
Mm-hmm.
And in thinking about it, it's kind of like what we as humans do. I think in almost all instances, we overcorrect.
Yes.
We want to get to, this was where I was. Well, I have to be on the exact opposite side.
That's actually the example that was given to me that saved my faith. So I'll have to tell you about that later. But so it was falling apart in college. And then I made a not great choice of going to a church when I was in graduate school, and then early on in my career that was pretty literalist in their approach as well. But by that point, the heretical seeds had been sown, so I was asking questions that got me sort of passive-aggressively asked to leave.
Was this after you were married?
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So as those things started to fall apart and you stopped denying it, right?
Mm-hmm.
After that year of denial or whatever, what was that? What did that feel like? Did it feel like you said, you used the words like shattered and you have to rebuild. Like, did you feel very alone? Like afraid?
I felt awful because I felt self-loathing because I felt like I had built my entire identity on something that I had found to be false. I'm not saying necessarily Christianity because, again, it resurrected in a different way, but on fundamentalist Christianity, we'll say, I had built an entire identity on that. That was what you remember me as a teen. I mean, that was a huge part of who I was.
Yeah.
When that all fell apart, I was like, what am I? Who am I? What does it, what does this mean? And so a pretty huge identity crisis, which I know is cliche for people in their early 20s to have, but I really had that, pretty riveted to my core. Didn't know what I thought, what I believed, what my values were. I knew that I wanted to be a person, who took ethics very seriously and who pursued something, both ethically powerful and also transcendent. But I didn't know what that looked like anymore. Okay. And I don't know if I ever really captured it when I was young. I think it was mainly a wall to protect me from my anxieties, my worries.
To answer those questions every Sunday morning. Exactly. We'll be back in an hour.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. And you had mentioned, so that kind of all fell apart for you.
Yeah.
And then, so this church that you went to that you were, quote, passive, I think you said passive aggressively kind of asked in a way.
And
what kind of
with Christianese.
Yeah. What kind of questions were you asking that were really setting them off?
And again, don't want to, I'm not trying to talk politics, but in undergrad, I had lived with a friend, and he's a gay man, and we lived together for 3 years. And so, when I was questioning the rigid stance of the church, because keep in mind, this is 2006, 2007, it's a very different world than 2019. So when I'm saying, I don't necessarily know that you're interpreting that correctly in your rigid approach.
Were they basically saying your friend was going to go to hell because he was gay?
Correct.
Okay.
And so I questioned that because I said, my life experience doesn't really jive with that. My empathetic response to him doesn't really jive with that because and he'd been having those feelings since forever, right? I mean, since he was a little kid. And so that really changed my heart. That was a big part of my change as a youth, was living with him, right? I mean, that's a very humbling, powerful experience. And so I was questioning that. I was also a lot more fiery in general than I am now because I was in my 20s. So I was, was questioning that should be the church's stance. Also questioning there were like women weren't allowed in leadership, which I thought was ridiculous. And so, and again,
leadership. Do you mean obviously not the pastor, but like lay leaders? Like what does that? So
mean? They weren't allowed to be even like in like the deacons, or again, I don't know what the terminology was at that church, but they weren't allowed. Basically, they weren't allowed in any leadership, and they were, in my opinion, interpreting first century culture as timeless biblical truth, which I don't think is accurate or appropriate. So that was their take. Those were two of the big things. And then also just the question that ultimately I didn't feel was answered well was I had just said, how can a God say that you should kill every man, woman, and child in the city of Ai, or in the Amalekites, or in any of the various parts of the book of Judges? How can that God do that and then also be a loving God and say that, Christ came from within him? How do those match up? How do those marry? I don't get this. And so I would often get answers that were not satisfactory.
To that?
So the
in general,
non-satisfactory answers were lots of foot shuffling and lots of so the answer that I got in fundamentalist circles was, so I'm defending a point that I don't obviously agree with, so was that God had to do that in order to establish the tribe of Israel in the Holy Land, and that was necessary to eradicate polytheism, basically.
Awesome.
Which I don't cut it for me.
Yeah.
For me, I don't kill it. Like if you're gonna kill genocide, cattle and babies, and teen people, that's not enough.
Yeah,
it's not enough for me. So anyway, I took my grievously wounded faith and left that church, because the thing that got me in trouble was more the questions of like, I think we should allow women in leadership. I think that that it's much grayer than you think it is in terms of human sexuality. I think we should invite all humans into this space so that we can learn together. That was what got me the boot.
Yeah.
Where I was told either stop asking hard questions or maybe this isn't the right place for you in a Christian-y nice way.
So was it the pastor who told you that?
No, it was actually someone under the pastor. So,
okay, gotcha.
But it was someone on staff. So, So I took my wounded faith and limped to a different church that I knew to at least be a little bit more what we'll call figurative instead of literalist, in their approach to the text. And I met the pastor, and it's funny because he at the time, he's not there anymore, but he's this old dude, old kind of grouchy, loud dude. And so I asked him, he says, ask me anything. This was like the first class where you come in. He's like, I'll tell you anything you want to know. You ask me any question. I said, okay. I said, why did a loving God say that people, the tribe of Israel, should kill babies and children and cattle and completely commit genocide on the people of Ai and on the Amalekites? And he said, I'm glad you asked that. That's a great question. And I was like, oh, well, how about
his feet did not shuffle.
His feet did not shuffle at all. And so he looked at me and he said, well, I'm not saying this is the definitive answer. I'm saying this is what we understand. The archaeological record of the Middle East from that time period doesn't really demonstrate big, full-scale battles and wars at these cities that have been excavated, Jericho and et cetera, et cetera. It actually looks like it's a slow decline over time. And so he says, if you really contextualize it and you put it in the framework, what a lot of archaeologists think, and Christian thinkers that, again, are willing to approach the text more figuratively, feel that what that was is a reflection of the writing of the people of the times. They said, so it was probably that Israelites were actually disenfranchised Canaanites that were leaving, they don't really know why, but left to create a new God, a new people, a new culture. But it's way sexier to say, we wasted them. We killed them. We're not them anymore. We're our own people.
For lack of a better term, it's like their own fan fiction.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And there's no smokinggun.com to fact check them, right? So it's ancient writing. It's ancient history. So his perspective was that the Israelites were the Canaanites. But as we all do, when we're not something anymore, we overcompensate by saying it's much sexier to say, so is it really sexy to say we left and slowly their infrastructure fell into ruin? Or is it sexier to say we left and we destroyed them? We wasted them. We were so powerful. Our God was on our side.
Yeah.
So he was of the perspective that it was a reflection of the people's theology at the time and the writing at the time. I can dig that.
And when you heard that answer, when it was more of a gray area answer, more of a maybe based in thought and history, etc., did you feel a relief?
I felt huge relief.
Okay.
I was like, yes, that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
I can accept that.
Yeah. And you didn't feel like, tell me if I'm wrong here, did it then also make you feel that your faith was more valid because it was based in more of a question? No, let me start over. Did it feel like your faith was more valid because you were now able to accept, oh, that's why this is presented in this way, and now I feel much stronger about having this faith around Christianity? Yeah.
So when the pastor did that, and just in general, his approach to that, he gave something that stuck with me for life. He said, if people want to interpret the Bible completely literally, that's fine. But they have a lot more to explain scientifically than I do as a person that's saying this is poetry, this is myth, this is creation stories, this is the experience of our identity as humans and as people that follow this guy named Jesus. That was so freeing to me. I mean, just to be able to say, I can learn from this. I can take these timeless lessons, even if this isn't literally factual. It does not mean that it is not ethically and spiritually factual, if that makes sense.
I think it does. Oh, gosh. So, sorry, I had a question. It was real great in my mind, and it's gone. But it goes back. Oh, okay. How about this? So, we've gone now from 9 years old, dropped off at the church, to you have this conversation and with this pastor.
Yeah.
So, did you feel like, and maybe answers aren't what you were looking for, but understanding is what you were looking
Thank
for.
you. Yes.
So you felt like it came full circle in a way.
Yeah, absolutely. So I feel less confident now that I know anything than I did when I was 9 years old. And that is so
That's
beautiful.
healthy.
That is so powerful
That's
to
what we
be
call
able to.
Healthy maturity.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so it's so good. It feels so good to just be able to say, I don't know, I'm learning. Let's talk about it. Let's have a conversation about it. Let's grow together.
But faith is still a big part of your life.
It's a huge part of my life because I feel like, in my opinion, those teachings of Christ are so timeless that I want to take them and follow them because I think they are transformative. It was a Christian writer explained to me, and I thought about this, it was very powerful to me. He's like, think of the Bible as essentially the library or an anthology. There's thousands, there's books and poetry and history from over spanning thousands of years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you don't say the library is literally infallible. It is literally, nobody says the library is infallible. You say there's a lot we can learn from the library. And I think that's, and I think that's so true.
That's a really good way to look at it.
To approach Christianity with curiosity and a desire to learn and to grow and to try to figure out, because Christ spoke almost exclusively in parables, which is ironic if you think about it, because people don't want to take the Bible as a parable, even though he spoke specifically in parables. Yeah. Right. So,
well, people want to take the Bible how they want to take it. It's their, my assumption, it's their answer.
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
Like, this is what makes me feel better. This gives me a better grip on the rope,
yes,
etc.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so to be able to kind of drop the rope and just say, I'm listening.
Yeah.
I want to learn. I'm going to read about it. I'm going to read books. I'm going to read about the context. I'm going to read about the history. I'm going to read about the language, and I'm going to learn, and I'm going to grow, and I'm going to change, and that's okay.
Do you find with the anxiety you've had in your life and continue to deal with, is faith a part of that?
Not anymore. Not as a negative thing anymore.
But meaning, okay, I guess, is it a positive thing? Does it help with the anxiety?
Yeah, I think it does. And it's not actually that I necessarily am hanging my hat on, oh, well, there's this perfect afterlife and I'll be going to heaven. And it's not. And again, if you look at like a first century rabbi like Jesus Christ would not have cared about the afterlife. That was not what it was about for people at that time period. It was about how to live well here in this place in life. They would not have given a crap about thinking about heaven and hell and et cetera. What they would have been so focused on was, how do I live obediently? How do I interpret these laws so that I can try to live a good life? And so if you kind of take it from that approach, it's very, very different than worrying about salvation and this and that. It's very powerful to just think about, how can I have a transformative experience here where I can lead a life that I'm feeling like is bettering the world.
Okay. And would you say it's fair to say that you're no longer worried that if you were to pass away about where you're going to go?
Yeah, it's just not a focus really. I mean, the only thing I feel like I have arrived at from now having studied the context and Greek is that to die and to be with God is heaven, and to die and be separated from him is hell. And I don't mean those in the literal sense. Right. I mean those in the figurative sense. Do you understand what I'm saying?
No. Yeah, we've had this conversation. I remember years and years ago when you had that little upstairs book room.
That's right.
Okay, so I have to ask you a little bit about what you do for work.
Sure.
And give me the elevator pitch, 30 seconds. What a social worker of your stripe does.
Yeah. So social worker on an inpatient rehabilitation unit. Social work is like the so what the MBA is to business, the MSW is to human service. So you can do all sorts of different stuff. What I do is I work on an inpatient rehabilitation unit with people that have had strokes, brain injuries, and spinal cord injuries, predominantly. There's other things too, but that's the biggest majority of it. What they're there to do is receive intensive physical, occupational, and speech therapy, try to either learn how to adapt to their new disability or to try to recover from it to the best of their ability. My role in that is I'm the person that helps with all the discharge planning, so getting appropriate equipment and follow-up therapy and services in the community and that sort of thing. I'm also helping with connecting them to resources that are available to them grants, Social Security, disability, Medicaid, waivers through the state, things of that nature. And then I'm also the liaison that's kind of going between the medical team and the treatment plan, and then sharing that with the patient and family, which is really a great place for a social worker to be, because as you can imagine, those discussions sometimes are laden with a lot of emotion, sometimes very happy emotion as things are getting better, sometimes grief, anger, lots of anger, lots of sadness.
See a lot of anger.
Lots of anger.
Is that kind of like a, especially with what you deal with the accidents, et cetera, like a why me type of anger?
Oftentimes, yeah. So I always joke that my favorite people to work with, and no one else generally likes to work with them, is the young, not particularly resourceful or not particularly adaptable, young, angry, spinal cord injured man. I love working with them.
Why?
Because they're so challenging, because they're so angry, and because they're so frustrated, broken, sad. But if you can weather the storm with them, and you can really show that you're in it with them, transformative things can happen.
What do you mean by weather the storm?
So there usually a lot of, and again, don't have the science to back this up, I'm just saying in my experience, young adult men with spinal cord injuries oftentimes don't have the resilience that maybe either older, more wise people do, or sometimes women are better connected with their community of friends that are able to support them. Young men tend to want to go it alone, and they tend to have a lot of their identity wound up inside them with their ability to have sex, their ability to walk, their ability to do a physical job, their ability to play with if they have kids, with their kids, or to play football or that sort of thing. And when you have a spinal cord injury, a lot of that is, we'll not say taken from them, but a lot of that is radically altered.
Yeah.
And so I find when I work with them and they're screaming and cussing and so upset, and the nurses are running away with their hands over their head and that sort of thing, I really like them. I really empathize with them. I don't think that I would have behaved all that differently if I were their age.
What's a good age? Just
so we'll say
24.
Yeah, we'll say 18 to 25.
Okay, so like NES was before their time.
NES was before their time.
Okay.
Yes, exactly.
Okay, got it.
So I actually love that population, and by God, if you can be there with them through that, you can see some magical things happen in their ability to cope, their ability to accept, to move on, and then to have an extremely meaningful and satisfying life that's different than what they envisioned.
Yeah, because you just named all those things: play with kids, sex, football.
Yep. Even that. So you want to know the single thing that bothers people most about spinal cord injuries that no one thinks about and no one talks about? Bowel and bladder issues. Because it alters that, right? So you have to start catheterizing yourself every 4 hours. You have to have a bowel program where you put your fingers into your rectal vault and empty it out. And no one's ever thought about that being part of their life. And it's scary and it's gross and it's frustrating and it's humiliating. But by God, if people can work on it and get it down, it's incredible. It's incredible to see people become resilient. It really is.
That's pretty hopeful stuff, I think. And I think it demystifies it a little bit. Right?
It's X's and O's. There's nothing magical about it. It's X's and O's. Mm-hmm. It's a program where you're keeping yourself off of your side. You're shifting in bed. You're shifting in your chair. Like I said, you're doing your cathing. You're doing your bowel program. You're doing all that stuff. And I'm not even really, that's nursing and therapy. I'm really helping them with connecting with Social Security, with adaptations at their job. I'm connecting them with their, specialized wheelchair, stuff like that. But it's so cool to be a small part of their recovery. And to be able to be part when I see them come back in a couple of years and they're killing it. They're in their chair. They always get huge pipes, from their wheelchair. Yeah. So they're just ripped out of their minds, and they're killing it at life. And it's really, and not everyone ends up that way, obviously. But it's really, really rewarding to say, you know what? I was a small part of that.
Yeah. Wow. It really puts a lot of things in perspective for sure. I want to end on one other thing. It's a little bit different. You and I, we've talked a little bit today about creative. We're both creative people. and you yourself have really committed pretty hard to writing.
Yeah.
Writing literature.
Mm-hmm. That's a bit strong.
Sorry, writing fiction. We'll say fiction.
Yeah. It's not highbrow enough to be literature.
No, of course not. No. But you have self-published one novel.
Mm-hmm.
I believe you're going to self-publish a second.
Correct. Yep.
I don't know if you want to talk about the experience of putting yourself out there and what that rejection has felt like.
Yeah.
When you weren't able to get it published.
Yeah. So Kevin, it's really weird. So I feel like I'm this like pretty resilient guy that's learned to deal with anxiety and, and like can give myself space to not be reactive and be responsive. All of that went out the window when I was trying to send my book out to agents.
Mm-hmm.
So just to backpedal a little bit, wrote my first book. It took me about 4 years. But I didn't know what I was doing. It was really fun. I did it. I self-published. It was really cool. But the second one, I committed myself. I said, I'm going to take, I'm going to take online classes. I'm going to work on my grammar. So I really committed myself, and discipline comes fairly easily to me in a lot of ways, which I think is maybe why I gravitated toward fundamentalism.
Yeah.
So I took an online course, and I would get up before work because I already get up to work out to run 4 or 5 miles. And then I would get up 20 minutes earlier to study grammar before my kids got up. So I would work out. I would get my kids to school. I would go for 20 minutes to Einstein Bagels and study grammar. And then I would go to work. So all that happened, before work. And so I did that for years while I was working on my second novel. Spec'd it out. I did an entire spec'd out outline as the class suggested for 6 months before I even wrote anything. And I spent years. I spent the last couple of years writing the book. Completed the book, did 3 drafts of it, had it professionally edited. Took those, had 12 beta readers, yourself included. Yep. Took their information, integrated into the book. Again, had the professional edit. And I know I still know to this day, have a very good, powerful finished product. And I think you would probably say that as well.
Yes, I was blown away by it. Yeah.
So what you do, the way that the writing industry works is you send out query letters. So that's a pitch, essentially. And then you send out a writing sample. And you do that. And what happens is if they like it, they do what's called a partial manuscript request, where they request 50 pages. If they like that, they do a full manuscript request. If they like that, they offer to represent you. If they do that, then they take your book to the publishing houses. Publishing houses generally won't touch unagented writers for the most part.
Okay.
It's over 80% of books that get published are agented. So they're the gatekeepers. So I sent it out and was very happy because I got some manuscript requests. And I don't think I knew the enormity of that until one of the agents posted her stats online, and I was blown away because so she said she got 25,000 query letters in 1 year.
Oh, wow.
She requested the partial manuscript on 740. She requested the full manuscript on 41 of those, and she represents 5. She picked up 5 new authors.
Did you have people ask
25,000 down to 5?
Did you have people ask for the full?
So I had a couple of partials and a couple of fulls. And so that was really rewarding, but it was almost more painful because then they chose not to represent it. So to have been on the doorstep was really crushing.
What did that, so you say it's crushing. How did it crush you?
So I felt like when you do art, and I'm sure you feel the same way, you feel like it is something that you have mined from your soul. And so then you put that in writing form. You spend all these years on it. And then someone either just looks at the query and says it's not that original or it's not that interesting in a nice way. No one ever really says things in a mean way, which is nice. People are not actually that way. But or they say, I didn't like this one tiny thing about it, so I'm not going to rep it. I requested the full manuscript. I've got all these hopes up, and then it's like, but I really don't like the way the dialogue sounds, and I don't like this one scene, so I'm not going to rep it. Because usually they're getting so many books their way, they don't have the time or desire to be like, oh, fix A, B, C, D, E, F, G, and then send it back to me. Yeah. Very rarely do they do that.
Yeah.
You just kind of miss that boat when that happens. So I sent out to 100 agents. I got some manuscript requests, got a couple of fulls, but I don't have an agent. Still don't to this day. And I've really tapped out the science fiction and fantasy agents pretty strongly. So that felt like a huge failure because I'm a very goal-oriented person, and my entire goal was I'm going to get this one published in the traditional market. Damn it. It's going to happen.
Yeah.
And I didn't get it. I didn't achieve it. And so that made me that put me through a period of time in which that was one of the most unhappy and toxic time periods of my life, where I was so bitter. I felt so
bitter. Okay.
Personally wronged and bitter.
Okay.
I felt like you didn't understand. I did that because of this. I did that because of that. Like you're not giving me a chance because of this. I became a bitter, paranoid, toxic person inside my head behind the mask of being okay. And it's so stupid because, again, I think about like my wife's girlfriend who's, battling cancer at 30. I'm like, that's a real problem. I don't have real problems. My real problem is that I can't get my book published. Join the other 24,995 people, right? So, but God, it hurt. Oh my God, it hurt so much. I just remember unloading the dishwasher one night, listening to, what's it called? The Overhead Toxic. You know that band?
Airborne Toxic.
Airborne Toxic Event. Just listen to Airborne Toxic Event, and that
was my Brent impression.
And unloading the dishwasher and just bawling and just holding a plate and just worried that I was going to crack it because I was just so frustrated. Just felt so impotent. Just so incapable of achieving what I had set my mind to. And that hurt. And it took a long time. I actually literally went to counseling for it because I just was so unhappy. It was interfering with my marriage. It was interfering with my life. And I'm getting space from it. I'm starting to be able to say, this was my creation, but this is my personhood. And those are two different things. And my creation, I think...
Separating yourself from the thought, like you said earlier.
Exactly. And I think what it was what helped so much was that my editor she really said something that was great. She said, look, I'm telling you, I have edited a lot of books. And she says, I'm not blowing smoke up your ass. Yours is actually really good. But she said, good is just the first thing a book has to be to get published in the traditional market. It also has to be a lot of other things. Maybe hip, maybe timely, maybe, it has to be a lot of other things. Those are the things you can't control. You have a good book. It just isn't at this time in this culture of what is being agented. It isn't what they're looking for, I guess. And so it made it okay. And it allowed me to start to try to focus on, because my perspective is what ultimately matters. I have created this thing. I know it's good. In my heart, I know it's good. And by God, I have complete creative control.
It's all yours.
I mean, as a self-published author, I can literally say whatever the hell I want.
When will that be published?
It's going to be either the first or second week of November.
And where can people buy it?
Amazon.com. It'll be both in Kindle form and then also in trade paperback form.
And then, can you tell us the name of it?
Yeah, it's called Scab Among the Stars.
Scab Among the Stars. Okay. Yep. So either first or second
week in November, depending on when I get my cover back, because they're designing the cover right now, and I got to work on formatting and all these very stressful, obnoxious things that you have to do when you're DIYing it.
Yeah. Okay. So Scab Among the Stars.
Yep.
You can find it on Amazon as a Kindle or a trade paperback.
Yep.
First or second week in November.
Yep. And pick it up, drop a review. Yeah. That always helps because then it helps get you in the metadata.
Yep.
Which is helpful.
I know my father reads more than I do, and he reads a ton of self-published stuff on Amazon.
Yeah.
Loves it.
And it really actually, not to belabor the point, but it actually, in my heart, allows me to feel like it's actually a better fit for me as a person, because indie authors come from such a genuine place. They're not worried about necessarily appeasing this demographic or trying to appeal to 18 to 21-year-old. What they're really trying to do is just tell a story. And so in my heart of hearts, even if I don't make as much money as an indie author as I would as a traditional published author, by God, that's where stories come from.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
It's very true. And it is, and I'm not a science fiction or fantasy guy, as you know. I read all the time, but I have trouble reading that stuff. But I really enjoyed your book.
Appreciate it.
And I was pretty blown away by it. So the last thing I want to ask is, where can people go to learn more about what we were talking about with anxiety? Is there a couple websites or or maybe not website, book, what would be a good place for them to maybe look more into kind of the type of therapy you were talking about?
Yeah, so ACT is relatively new. It's fairly young, and it is something that some people do practice, some people don't. I'll have to get back to you. Is it possible for me to send you
we can put
links
it in
and the
notes.
information and put it
Yeah,
in?
we'll put links in the notes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just because I don't have it right off the top of my
that's
head, but so people generally have a benefit through their insurance for counseling. They may not know that, but they generally do. If you have Medicare, Medicaid, or private insurance, generally there's a benefit for it. So if you can be an informed consumer and try to find someone that practices ACT, that's a good place to start. There's a lot of self-help books about ACT that are out there. The Big Book of Metaphors. You can do things where it can like work through an ACT perspective with like different workbooks and things like that. You can find those at Barnes & Noble or Amazon, online.
Now, don't get it confused with the ACT prep book.
Exactly.
Then you're going to be really more anxious.
It's different. And I'm not trying to necessarily promote ACT. It's what worked for me. But there's CBT approaches.
I think it's if you're interested in it and you think it might work for you, I think it's worth checking out. So
absolutely,
we'll put some links to some stuff when we do post the episode, of course, and a link to information about your book, Scab Among the Stars on Amazon.com. John, Thomas, JT, Jizz. I hate that Jizz.
Oh, and I should say...
Yeah.
So,
go ahead.
Scab Among the Stars is under J.T.R. Brown because there's already an indie author named J.T. Brown. So I had to use my middle initial as well.
J.T.R. Brown.
Yep. On
Scab
Amazon.com.
Among the Stars, J.T.R. Brown. If you'd like, we can put that as our your name in the episode.
Okay, absolutely.
Okay. John, thanks so much for coming on. You made the trip up here to Chicago. It was an enlightening and really fascinating conversation, and I feel it was just really beneficial for anybody who listens. So thank you very much. I really appreciate you being so honest and thoughtful about all the stuff that you've dealt with. So thank you very much.
And talking about having awkward conversations about my balls with my dad.
That was, I like your dad's response the best. I think we'll end on that. What was his response?
Nah.
Okay. And with that, thanks for listening to Sad Times. And we will see you next time. Bye.
You've been listening to A Fourth Hand Joint.